as with every week, we study the wonders of the week, Rabbi Ginzburg's teaching. And this study group is Bezrat Hashem for Refuah, for first our beloved Rav Yitzchak Feivish ben Breina Malka, to our friend Bluma Bat Ginendel Tova, to my son Levi Ovia ben Ayala, and to my youngest son, the Rach Hanilad ben Ayala. He just had a surgery this week, and Bezrat Hashem, it should be a step in a very speedy recovery. Okay, so with that, we'll get started with this week's wonders. Before we go in, we'll just speak about what happened this week. So this week we had a campaign. It was they called it an annual campaign for funding of, first of all, the wonders of the week, even though a lot of it is donated by a certain person. They're still funding it. Some of the funding comes from this campaign. Also, the funding was for the website, the Gal and I website. I urge everyone to study from it, take a look at it. Very nice website. Still a couple bugs in the system, but they're working it out, so that's very nice. And they had the campaign. Let me open up the campaign just so we have it. No, I'll skip it, but everyone can still go on and donate to different things that Gal and I does. As we get to we'll learn a little bit about what donating to Gal and I can do to a person. Okay, so let's start. Let's get started. All right, enough with the introduction. Let's get started. What do we want to talk about? We spoke about last week the 5-step that brings me from being sad to being happy. That if someone wants to be happy, there's 5 steps, 5 simple steps that someone needs to take. Obviously, the first step is being sad, and someone can ask, why is that a step? Why is that not a given? So you can either say it's not a step, or you can say that there's worse things than being sad. Worse words, as Rabbi Nachman said, that you can give chas v'shalom. Someone could think that there's a thing called giving up, and other things. And we learned in Tanya a little bit that it could go even worse. But again, the first step is someone being sad, and then there are 4 other steps. If someone wants, you can watch the YouTube or read the wonders of last week. Really, really very nice stuff. The 4th level, the 4th step, again, the first step is being sad. The second step is turning it into shiflut, into being thinking of yourself in the right way. I'll leave it at that. And again, anyone that wants can look back at the last week's wonders. Then you become very bitter. And the good thing about bitter that makes it so much better than being sad is that a bitter person is someone that takes action, that's upset about something, but works very hard to fix it. And then after that is being humble. And finally, you get to be happy, meaning there's a step between doing something and being happy from it that's called anava, is humbleness. And that's the step we're going to dwell on a little bit. We saw it very amazingly in the talk that Rabbi Ginzburg gave. I'm sure there's a recording of that Zoom meeting that happened after the campaign. It was such a beautiful thing that everyone is donating for one cause, so that we can spread the Torah words that Rabbi Ginzburg teaches us. That's what everyone was there for. And there's over 100 people in the meeting, and Rabbi Ginzburg goes on. He was on the phone, and after we raised over 1 million shekel, or 1.6 Baruch Hashem, Rabbi Ginzburg asked, "Is it okay to say Advar Torah?" It's just if someone wants to just take an example of what humbleness is, you can see that Rabbi Ginzburg, how he approached the talk after the campaign, which is it okay if I say it about Torah? We all are here for that, for sure. That's the cause, but still being humble and thinking, let's see that everyone is good over here. So that was beautiful. The day of the campaign was a very, very, very special day. We spoke a little bit about the month of Adar. This month, that's Mishenichnas Adar, that from the time that Adar starts, Marbim B'Simcha, we spoke about it last week and the week before that there's tremendous amount of happiness that you need to bring, and also happiness that comes into this month of Adar. And one of the highlights of Adar, except for obviously the Chag Purim, except for that, is the date of the seventh day of Adar, Zayin Be'adar. That what happened on that day? On that day, Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Shemayim. He was nostalgic. And it was very known that when Haman, the Midrash said that when Haman was doing his let's call it raffle, when he was looking for the best time, the time that came, Haman was very connected to luck, to mazel, to raffles, to very interesting the way he operated. But at the end of the day, he came up with the month of Adar, and he was very happy. The Midrash says, why was he happy? He says that's the date that the famous leader and savior of the Jewish people that took them out of Mitzrayim and brought Torah, Moshe, the famous Moshe Rabbeinu, the famous tzaddik, the Moses of the Jewish people, he left, he passed away on this month of Adar. So he was very happy. But right away in the Midrash, the Torah explains that he forgot something, that the date that Moshe Rabbeinu was born was also the seventh day of Adar, that he completed his days. He lived in this world complete years. That there's a pasuk that Yamecha Amale, I forgot the beginning of it, but that your days should be full in the sense that your full year, that you pass away on the date you were born. And some very famous tzaddikim did pass away the day that they were born. But Haman, when he did this raffle, he forgot that this is also the day that Moshe Rabbeinu was born. And it's also the date that we had our beautiful campaign. So when Rabbi Ginzburg came on to speak, and again, this is our Wonders of the Week. On my screen, I'm going to the talk that Rabbi Ginzburg gave. This is the writing of it. That this day, the day of the campaign, was Zayin Adar, and where Moshe Rabbeinu passed away was the mountain Har Nevo. Nevo is composed of three letters: Nun, which is numerical value 50, Shara Nun, and Bo. Bo is in it. That Moshe Rabbeinu on that day was had, and this is very famous in Chazal, has reached the 50th level, the 50th gate, Chamishim Sharei Bina, that the highest level of understanding, of knowledge, of being connected to God, that he reached. He got the Nun, the letter Nun, the 50, Bo, in Moshe Rabbeinu. And Rabbi Ginzburg says, what does Moshe Rabbeinu do with that Nun? He takes the word Moshe, Mem Shin Hey, Moses, and then he puts the Nun in it, which create the word Mishnah. And Mishnah is the continuation of the Torah. So that continues Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu is the one that gave the oral Torah, but he takes the Nun and puts it in the written Torah. So again, there's two dates. The first date is when he was born. And we know that when he was born, it says, Vatere oto kitovhu, meaning that the house, hitmale abayit kulora, that the house was literally lit up. There was light in the house when Moshe Rabbeinu was born. And we know that from that date, the date of Moshe Rabbeinu's birth, the light started spreading all the way until he gave Torah and onwards, meaning that the life of Moshe Rabbeinu, the goodness of it starts from the day that he was born. But what does Moshe Rabbeinu do? And there's a very famous pasuk, the verse that says, "Vayish Moshe anav meod mikol ha'adam asher al pnei adama." That Moshe was the most humble man from any man to walk this earth, to be on the ground in this world. And what does he do? He takes it and basically takes his whole life and says that it is nothing. He puts it in perspective. There's a very famous story of Rabbi Nachman, the very deep story about the beggars, the 7 beggars. And the story goes that the first beggar was blind. And why was he blind? Because he couldn't see this world. This world, however, the current time is keherefine, is like the blink of an eye. So if that's the case, then you can, quote unquote, not see anything in this world. It's too small, too fast. So the same thing, again, that's, by the way, Rabbi Ginzburg goes into that. This is the explanation of why the end of Torah, the last 5 verses of Torah, we don't know. We have the sages argue about who wrote it, whether it's Moshe Rabbeinu that wrote it in his cries, in his ma'ot, in his tears, or was it Yoshua, the next leader, was he the one that wrote the psukim? But again, the concept is behind it because that's where it praises Moshe Rabbeinu. So how could you praise Moshe Rabbeinu? So either he didn't do it, or he did it, but it meant nothing. Why did it mean nothing? Because of what we're saying, that he made it nothing, that he was able to look in the perspective that made it nothing. We'll go into it a little bit more and explain, and I want to also connect it a little bit to us, a little bit the way we look at it. When I spoke over these wonderful wonders with my wife, she mentioned that we sometimes could say, I didn't do anything today. What do you mean you didn't do anything? You did so many things today. You woke up, etc., etc., etc. But we can look at it and say it was nothing, because what I wanted to do, and this the Lubavitch Rebbe speaks about it a lot, what I wanted to do in the bigger perspective, in the bigger picture, I didn't do anything today. So let's explain it a little bit more with our famous Rabbi Zusha, wonderful tzaddik, Rabbi Zusha Manipoli, that he was a Talmid of the Rav Magid, and the Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe of Chabad, would always call him the greatest Torah scholar. And it was very weird because people knew him as like a simple guy that was always happy. He was always dancing and was always walking around. He wasn't so, he didn't look like your average Talmid Chacham, your average scholar with a lot of knowledge. But very interesting that Rabbi Ginzburg sheds a light on the fact that Rav Zusha, when he was young, he was a Rav Kehillah, he was a famous Rav, he was a rabbi, and he had a lot of Torah knowledge. But amazingly, that the Rav Magid, his teacher, called Rabbi Zusha that he's connected to the crown. He's above the simple chokhmah and bina, simple knowledge and understanding of this world, and therefore he was able to make people forget. There's another story about it from also a descendant of the Baal Shem Tov that made people forget about him. Same thing, Rabbi Zusha, he made people think that he was a simple guy, and everyone forgot that he was a big rabbi. Just imagine, take a big rabbi that you guys know, anyone can think of a big rabbi, and think that after 20 years, he can walk around and seem like a simple guy. Very, very hard. Usually people remember you for what you were. Unless, chas v'shalom, someone forgot his Torah. There's also stories in the Gemara about that. But let's go back to Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu worked on his life's work to make it as if it was nothing. And the proof, the way Rabbi Ginzburg says, is if you walk to any academical school these days, I mean, Rambam, when he wants to say what is our emunah, our faith is that we have Mamad Har Sinai, and he said it's such a big thing that you can't fake it. You can't fake 40,000 people standing and seeing Kadosh Baruch Hu. So God was, in a sense, at this big event, and still today, if you ask anyone, no one has any knowledge of it. There's no physical proof. It's left to the people to believe in Moshe Rabbeinu, in Yetziat Mitzrayim. Very interesting. A whole nation gets out of Egypt. It's supposed to be everywhere. You're supposed to find so many archaeological and proofs for it. It's supposed to be in every book, and still nothing. The only place you find it is in the Bible, because Moshe Rabbeinu took it and he purposely made his whole life nothing, to the level that it's only faith. If you want to believe in our famous Moses, you got to have faith. There's nowhere else. Again, there's always here and there, but the core, I'm sure if you ask someone in Reb Zusha's stage, if you remember the Rav, it was. But the core fundamentals is that if you want to believe in Yetziat Mitzrayim and in the exiting Egypt, if you want to believe in the giving of Torah, if you want to believe in Mount Sinai and all these things, you need to have faith. This is not there's no proof to it. There's no physical, because what Moshe Rabbeinu did is he took his whole life and made it nothing. This does go into the Rambam. The Rambam has a very famous way of knowing God. He says, you know God by knowing what he's not. God is not a person. That's a good start. God is not something physical, because and that's why you know God by it's called shlila, by saying what he's not. And by saying what he's not, what you're getting to is nothing. The famous nothing, which is called an ayin, that the Baal Shem Tov said that ayin, nothing, is the mazal, is the luck of Am Yisrael, that creates what we want to create when you're going back to nothing. But all of this is leading us to the second Moshe Rabbeinu. There's two Moshe Rabbeinus. I did forget to mention that Rabbi Ginzburg mentioned in the beginning that if you take Zayin Adar, the words, the numerical value is the same as Rabbi. Rabbi is a sense a leader, but it's not only a rabbi and a leader. A rabbi to Hasidim, to us, is like a leader, like a king, like it's everything. It's a rabbi to a chassid is everything. And if you take Rabbi twice, it equals Mashiach ben David, Messiah, the descendant of David. So there's two things in this date of Zayin Adar, the seventh day of Adar, when Moshe Rabbeinu was born and when Moshe Rabbeinu was nistalik, was lifted from this world, that both of them together equal Mashiach ben David. And we said that Mashiach, the word Mashiach, if you add to it echad, one, if you add to Moshe Rabbeinu one, then it equals numerically Mashiach also, the Messiah. That it says that Moshe Rabbeinu is our first redeemer, hu goel rishon, and he's also our last redeemer. That there is something in Mashiach that is connected to the soul of Moshe Rabbeinu. That Moshe Rabbeinu is in every generation. When Haman was looking at it, let's talk about Haman. Haman, it says in the Gemara very interestingly about a conversation that Haman had with the famous king Achashverosh. So Haman goes to Achashverosh and says, "Listen, these Jewish people, they're not practical." What was the proof of Haman that Jews are not practical? that every time you ask them, they say, listen, it's Shabbat, it's Sabbath, and we don't work and we don't do anything on Shabbat. It's a holiday. It's the holiday of Pesach, which is also 7 days of Chol HaMoed. And there's always excuses for them to not be relevant. This has to do with what we spoke about last time, that connecting to Shabbat is a little bit out of this world's game. If we want to look at this world as a repeated game, the way I like to show how crazy it could be is you look at some of the, call it work ethic in some of the countries like China and other countries that don't have labor laws necessarily, and you look at their work ethic, and you see that an employee over there can literally work 7 days a week. The amount of hours, like maximum amount of hours, and then sleep a little bit, and then again and again and again and again and again. I mean, today's world, where it's much more connected to Mashiach, to the end of days, there's a lot more vacations. There's a lot more days off. But that's something relatively new. 100 years ago, 200 years ago, there was almost no days off, depending on the place. And the more lower in the economical scale in the world you go, there's no days off. So again, you can be in a cycle of work, in a cycle of this world where you can't get out of it. If you remember, when we read in the Bible about Pharaoh and the conversation that he had with Moses, Moses says, listen, you got to give us 3 days off. That's all he asked for. He said, we want to go out for 3 days. Okay, what did Paro say? He says, there's a problem here. The people, he said the famous pasuk, the famous verse, Tichbad avodah al anashim. Work is not heavy enough. People have time. And with this time, they're thinking about all these craziness of leaving us. So what are we going to do? We're going to make them work even harder, and that's going to solve all problems. There's very deep things into it, but the core concept is that someone, if you want to be in this world, you can get into a loop of saying, this is the game. I got to wake up. I got to bring money home. I gotta work. I got to do what I got to do. I got to, we go to the bathroom, we eat, we get dressed, we go shopping, we do all these things that we quote unquote have to do. You can literally live your life with doing what you have to do. And when it comes to what you want to do, you're so confused that you kind of sit down and watch a movie. You're lost. You kind of go and dream about something. Someone, the more connected you are, the more you're able to leave this world. And a Jew has to be leaving this world at least once a week. And above that, he has to be also having holidays and different things. What is one of the main points in that, and we spoke about it last week in the Wonders, is that this is where you gain to be able to be out of the game. And when you're out of the game, you're able to lead. I heard once, Lahavdil, of course, I heard once about a book about a person that went to many rich people that made it in life, and according to that book, and asked them, what is your recommendation? And one guy said that my recommendation is, I think a few guys even said it, is to sit for a half hour a day and just look at the window. Which reminds me of a very famous joke that one Jew was praying, and as he was praying in the middle of Shemona Esrei, in the middle of his prayer, he started thinking, wait a minute, I have this non-Jew partner, and he's going to go and do this. And then after he does that, he'll do this and this. And he made a whole complex plan. And he says, after he does that plan, he's going to steal everything from me. So he was shocked. What am I going to do? So he finished the prayer and walked up to the rabbi and says, Rabbi, what am I going to do? The non-Jew is going to steal everything from me. And the rabbi looks at him, and again, this is a joke, and says, he's not going to do anything. Oh, thank you, Rabbi. How do you know? Like, very simple. He doesn't pray every day. The joke is that during that time, you can be in the game still and still think about this world. And we know that the higher level, and it's above the joke, is that when you really pray, you're able to leave this world enough to be able to come back to it with all new plans when you really connect. But going back to what we're saying. What we're saying is that Moshe Rabbeinu, when he was making this world nothing, he was connecting it back to God. So that's Moshe Rabbeinu lifting, obviously, his body. He's leaving this world, but he's making this whole world go back up. And once it goes up, it goes back down every generation. And that's the difference. This is where we go into the difference between the first Moshe Rabbeinu, the one that Haman thought that since he left us, Chas v'Shalom, Jewish people have no further plans, and to the Moshe Rabbeinu that's in every generation, until the final Moshe Rabbeinu, which is going to be within the soul of the Messiah. The Moshe Rabbeinu is, we'll just say it, we won't get into it, is Nishmat Moshe Beguf David. And that goes into these two levels of Moshe Rabbeinu, being born and symbolizing his life, and then passing away and symbolizing, again, not just lifting everything to God, but also after that coming back. This goes into two ways of looking at this world. You can look at this world as everything is God. So a real believer, and this the Rav Magid said, and we spoke about it a little bit, needs to take everything in this world and give it to God. I did something, I didn't do anything. God did everything in this world. We're nothing. We're really, really nothing. There's nothing. Your problems are nothing. Your good things are nothing. Everything is nothing because everything is God. That's where you say that everything is God. And that's the basic of a believer. Before we go into the next step, which I'm sure everyone will connect to more because our generation is more connected to that level, we'll say that this step is a very high spiritual level that brings person a lot of happiness and a lot of lifts him up. That he basically says, I am connected to God and everything is God. So everything is cool. Everything is fine. Everything is nothing because everything is God. That's the basic spiritual person. That you take, what is spirituality? Someone can go to see other spiritualities which are fake, but what you see is people leaving all their physical stuff. You leave everything, some places in India have it, etc. You leave everything and you just lift everything up. So that's one way to look at spirituality. Obviously it's fake, but that's one way of looking at it. Everything is God. But the second way to look at, God is everything. So again, I don't want to confuse it. That God is everything is the higher level to lift everything to him, but everything is God is the lower level, but still the final level. What does that mean? That means that I could say that everything is nothing because there's God and God puts it in perspective. Again, let's look at a little kid. He plays. So he takes out his board and he plays, let's call it Monopoly, and now he has won all the Monopoly money. He has it all in his hand. Is it something? To the kid, it could be everything. But when you zoom out a little bit and look at the adults looking at him and saying, you got nothing. And it goes up and up and up, that the more you zoom out, you look at this world, you say, it's nothing. On the other hand, you can look at it the opposite and say, God created this world, and he created this table and this monopoly. So within it, there is God. So everything is God. And that's Mashiach. Messiah doesn't make everything go away. He doesn't make everyone forget that there was the exile of Egypt and forget there was Matan Torah and forget everything and just make it spiritual and have it faith. But rather, Mashiach is the same letters as Hamchasha, is, let's call it proving. I'm not sure of the exact translation of it, but the Mashiach, what he does is he makes the spiritual go into the physical and work together. That in the end of days, we will know, we won't just believe there was the exile, we will know it. Science and this world will connect to Torah, which is what Rabbi Ginzburg works every day to show, that they work together. Not only together, they work well with each other. They make putting them together creates things, beautiful things. And when you have that sense of looking at this world, that everything is God, everything becomes much more meaningful. If you, let's give a very not exact but simple example. If you take this Monopoly money that this kid just won and he's holding it in his hand, and you take a very rich person, okay, you take, let's just take as an example, Bill Gates. And he stands there and says to all the adults that are sitting there laughing at the kid, he says, every $100 of the Monopoly money, anyone that has it, I'll give him $100,000, real money. Whoa, all the adults said, listen, little kid, move around. It's very serious business over here. And they start grabbing all the money. What happened? What happened was, the only difference is, in our example, now simple or stupid example that I just thought of, Bill Gates says this money is worth something, and it just instantly became worth something. Lehavdil, obviously, many separations and just very little connection, but still looking at the way God looks at this world, when God says this is worth something, that everything is God, and it becomes worth something, that this world is worth something. It's not something I want to make nothing of, the opposite. I'm able to see Hashem in everything in this world. And that's the machloket that the Rambam have with Rabbi Chizdai. That the Rambam says, I want to make everything nothing. And once you talk about what God is not, that's the only way to know God. And the Rebbe Rashab speaks about that he's able to know God by learning. When he's in a room by himself, he's able to know what God is, not just by the sense of saying what he's not, but what he is. And that's what Mashiach will do. Will make everything in this life, in this world, become what it is. And that's where we're getting to the ending. We still have a few minutes, which is good. Today was a short wonder. Obviously, there's other things in this amazing Wonders booklet. You can see on the side, it's in a beautiful 40 pages with a lot of things. But the current teaching that we're talking about is a simple talk that Rabbi Ginzburg gave a few minutes on the phone. So we're able to squeeze it in the time that we have. But what we're saying is, and I'll summarize everything until now, is that the day of the campaign was Zayin Adar, the 7th day of Adar. That's the date when Moshe Rabbeinu passed away. And that's why Haman thought that that's the good date to make the Jews pass away. But what Haman didn't know is that it's also the day that Moshe Rabbeinu was born. And what Rabbi Ginzburg teaches, based on Kabbalah and deep understanding, is that those two things of being uplifted from this world, passing away, and being born in this world are two things that are connected together during that day. And you can even say that those connection is, there's one way of connecting it by being born and passing away. The other way is passing away. Moshe Rabbeinu is being uplifted, but being born again and going into the soul of a new leader of the generation. And every generation has a Moshe Rabbeinu that's being born. And obviously the generation of Haman was Mordechai, a Yehudi, that he was the Rebbe would really connect to Mordechai many times in his teaching. But Moshe Rabbeinu is born again in the same concept of the 7th day of Adar. And not only that, at the end of the day, the final birth, the Mashiach, would also have Moshe Rabbeinu within him. And that's the Moshe Rabbeinu that doesn't just see everything as nothing, as everything is outside this world, but rather sees God in everything in this world, that everything is God, that is able to look at this world and not make it go away, but rather make it be meaningful. And that's what we're looking for. And Rabbi Ginzburg says some beautiful things about the campaign, which I want to dwell on a few minutes that we have left. He says that if we didn't have the campaign, we could have fun making everything nothing. Meaning if we look at Rabbi Ginzburg sitting, you can sit and learn and see God's wonders by himself and make this whole world, make it nothing. And he can have so much fun doing that. And he does that from time to time. that's essentially Bitul Torah versus learning Torah. But real Torah learning, you can really appreciate that when you look at Rabbi Ginzburg learning Torah and what he learns from it and how he makes it relevant. That how it's coming to this world. So what Rabbi Ginzburg says is, it would have been a lot of fun if we didn't raise any money. I can sit at home and just learn Torah. I'm saying this, so Rabbi Ginzburg didn't say I can sit at home. That part I'm elaborating on it based on my understanding. So let's put it in perspective. But we made this whole campaign. Why? That we want this world to be something. We don't want to be uplifted. We don't want Rabbi Ginzburg's teaching to sit and have a fun thing for us, a couple students that are having fun and amazing fun with his Torah. But rather, we want it to be in this world. And what do we do for that? We take debt. What is this debt? This debt is that either we go into debt in order to fund the campaign, or in a sense, you could say that Galena, I won't even say Rabbi Ginzburg, the organization now has a debt because it has 1.6 million shekels. It needs to use it, right? It's owing people. You owe people. Having a debt is not just when you have something, when you owe something. This whole world, this whole body and soul and everything is a debt from Hashem. But that debt gives me the power to do something in this world. So having debt is knowing God. So it's a very high level. So what we're doing is we're taking this campaign and we're using it in order to bring everything to God, but also bring God into this world. And again, I urge everybody I participated in that everyone can participate, even in the smallest amount, but everyone should be part. And obviously, the more the merrier. But I don't even know if that's a good statement. But everyone should participate in this campaign. And Rabbi Ginzburg ended and said that the Rebbe would put a limitation to drinking. But he didn't put a limitation on saying l'chaim. So you can say l'chaim, l'chaim, l'chaim many times and being happier every time. L'chaim, l'chaim. That we as Chassidim, we use the alcohol, the mashke, the uplifting of it to bring chayim. We say l'chaim, for life, to bring life into this world. You can say that again and again and again, and you don't even have to drink, and you can bring a lot of happiness. So we'll say Purim Sameach. The Purim is coming up, and we want everybody to be happy, be really happy. And as we said, real simcha comes from being humble, not from thinking of what you are, but thinking what you're part of, and being part of such an amazing thing, whether it's being part of this world, being Jewish, being connected to Rabbi Ginzburg, being part of this amazing thing that's happening, the Geula, Hamitit Vashlema, being connected to Chabad, connected to the Lubavitch Rebbe, connected to all these beautiful things. A person can be really, really happy without thinking of himself and his selfishness and how he ruins things. As we read in the Tanya and the Yom Yom a couple of days ago, that you should never mix up the happiness of the soul with the sadness of the body. The body is always sad because it's going down, but the soul is always happy. We'll dwell on it some other time. All right, I have a few minutes I'm going to leave to anybody that has any questions of what we studied a little bit today. And I urge everybody again to be part of the campaign, to read these wonders, to be connected and uplifted by these great things, and to have a real Chag Sameach.